Hi, so I'm gonna talk about a few random subjects on particularly psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar 1 mania. All of these are related to excess dopamine or excess dopamine receptors in the brain. So, like the neurons that are guided by dopamine, that are like activated by dopamine, they fire more frequently than usual, and so connections are happening more quickly than the average person, and so many of these connections are superficial and not useful for the person. So even like small ideas, small thoughts, small suspicions, they gain importance in the brain. So any small idea, fear, or unfounded belief can suddenly gain a lot of importance in the person's brain. It ultimately boils down to excess dopamine neuron activity, but it can be due also to glutamate excess activity. The glutamate excess activity can then cause the dopamine to be released excessively also. So that's why there's this antipsychotic Zyprexa. It seems that it doesn't, I'm not sure if it's true, but um, sometimes psychiatrists they lie. So one of my psychiatrists, like my recent psychiatrist told me that the Zyprexa that I was taking isn't a heavy dopamine blocker, but it's more of a serotonin HT5 HT. Let me check for a second. Yeah, so it blocks 5HT2A receptors. It's particularly high in these receptors, and these receptors, when blocked, the serotonin 5HT2A, when they're blocked, they reduce glutamate activity. So glutamate has excess glutamate activity and neuron firing. Glutamate neuron firing has also an incidence on psychosis. I believe there is a way to reduce the excess dopamine activity simply by not rewarding or reinforcing the thought in your mind. Whenever there's a belief that has importance, that importance is due to the fact that there's excess dopamine. But if you find a way to ignore it or not engage with it, the less it's reinforced, the more the receptor's gonna, like, the receptor can get back, can like retract into the neuron if it's not activated too much. So, and then dopamine can be, I believe that dopamine can be released more slowly if the person learns to not reinforce the activity. It's a basic principle in machine learning. The first theoretical description of how neurons learn and adapt was from Rosenblatt. He wrote a paper about the perceptron, and it was like a simple version of how we learn to identify, have a specific response to stimuli. And it said that like there was different models where a response to a stimuli, when it occurs often enough, it can be reinforced. So if the stimuli causes that response and the person feels rewarded, there will be a reinforcement of the neuron. So the neuron will tend to have better frequency or impulse intensity the next time, so that that response gonna happen more frequently for that same stimuli. So, and also whenever you feel punished by a certain response, like the response isn't helpful to you, there could be also a loss of the, we call delta V. There's a loss in the neuron frequency or amplitude of firing, and then that response will be less likely to be that response connected to those neurons will less likely occur in the future, because the neurons will be less like, will have less juice in it, less nutrition, less electrolytes. So the fact that you learn to punish yourself or like or reinforce a certain behavior means that you could possibly I believe, maybe it's not true, but I've seen people who've recovered from schizophrenia by letting go of certain beliefs that were useless for them. They realized it later, because while you're in psychosis, you just don't realize that your thoughts are used. Some thoughts are useless, but they learn to like let go of draining thoughts and less reinforce them. And somehow, probably what happened is that the neurons that were dumping the dopamine, or the receptors, just retracted. And so activity got reduced and they rewired their brain. So maybe it's not possible for every person with schizophrenia, but I believe there is a chance like that you can rewire yourself. And I hope that I can do it, but I cannot get my hopes too up. I always find it important to have an extra set of antipsychotic on hand, so that whenever I'm out of balance, my thoughts are going too rapidly and it's not bearable, or I can't handle it too easily, I'll have the medication at least with me. The worst thing that could happen is someone like is in crisis and he doesn't have any antipsychotics on hand, and he has no choice but to do something drastic, and he may end up in the psychiatric ward. And then when you're in the psychiatric ward, they will have full control over you, because whatever drastic action you took, if it was harming yourself or someone else or putting you at risk, they have the power to have you locked up and give you medication that you have to comply to take. If they prove in court that you're a danger to yourself in the short term or to other people. And so I think the fact that you have some antipsychotic on hand, so that when your mind goes quickly, or you feel high, or you feel in pain, or you haven't slept for a few days, and you want to relax and you feel agitated, temporarily taking the antipsychotic as needed can actually erase the state and give you a reset so that you can start over. Because there is a misconception that whenever you need antipsychotics, you will have to need it for the rest of your life. And I know for a fact that this isn't true, because there are some people who've gone off antipsychotics or have like almost a really negligible dose of antipsychotic. And whenever they were like having symptoms more intense, they would take the extra antipsychotic on hand, and then the psychosis was gone, and they just kept on with their life, and they didn't need to take any extra antipsychotic later on. But that is assuming that you already have a base dose of antipsychotic, or you're without any antipsychotic, but you're fine for it's your baseline, like you don't need any. But depends on different people. And so an example of a person who got off his, like, who recovered from schizophrenia, it's rare, but it happens, is this guy. He had symptoms for 3 years, and by the willpower of like questioning and letting go of like obsessive thoughts, and really like the idea is to not be a slave of your thoughts. It's not to be controlled by them. And so he was able to let go of some of his favorite beliefs. So you see, that's what he did. Like, I asked him how was he able to transition out from his delusions, which is the main symptoms of psychosis. And he said that it was a hard thing to do. He had to, yeah, you can read that answer. It's really deep, but it's not something that you can do from the get-go. But if you're without medication, then that's something that you actually have the power to do. I believe that the antipsychotic, yes, it does remove the symptoms, but it makes you harder to realize what are the triggers and the fluctuations of your symptoms, so that you know how to prevent it, or how to have that extra energy to inhibit the bad habits. I feel like even though a medication can sedate you and calm you and tranquilize your thoughts, the fact that it tranquilizes you will actually prevent you from having the mental energy and clarity to question yourself and to attack your thoughts, and to learn to say, like, I'm not sure if that thought is useful or not, so I'm gonna let go of that. And the action of let it go is harder to do when you have antipsychotics. And it is the same thing for hallucinations. Like, yes, some antipsychotics, they reduce the occurrence of hallucinations and the intensity, but sometimes it doesn't erase the hallucination completely. So the person will have a little more difficulty to play with it, dance with it in a way that he can learn to manage the fluctuations. It's harder to do so when you're like sedated by the antipsychotic. So this guy recovered without any medication, and then there's her. She's the main schizophrenia channel on schizophrenia, and she recovered by starting a diet that cut off mainly glucose, so no carbs, like almost no carbs. It's the ketogenic diet, and she still takes antipsychotics as needed, like an extremely small dose, and it like kicks her out from those psychosis states, and she goes on about her life without any antipsychotics. Um, there's also this guy. He's taking a almost no antipsychotic, but in the beginning he was taking a lot. But he quit smoking and alcohol, and he started. He started. He also started the ketogenic diet, and he was okay. Like he was able to get lower his dose a lot, and I believe now he takes almost nothing as antipsychotics. So yeah, whatever you eat, it has a role to play in your brain. I remember when I was sick in 2020, I was always eating fast food and drinking Coca-Cola, and I think it has an effect on your brain. It will probably like increase the psychotic symptoms, like your metabolism when it's out of control with all those fast foods. I believe that it could actually make you more at risk to have like irregular thought patterns. And remember this guy? This guy used to have bipolar one. Like he used to have like paranoia and suspicion, but in between episodes he was fine. Like he was normal. If only he had like some medication on hand, so that when he felt really like crap, he could take it to like calm everything down. Because what I believe happened was that he had a high and he started posting on Twitter. Like his name is Etika. He was a really fun guy to watch as a as a streamer, as a YouTuber. And what I believe happened is he was mania. He had mania, and he was feeling high. He saw everything connected. He had suspicions. He thought he was the Antichrist, and people didn't take him seriously online. They were joking around about his post. They thought he was like joking. And whatever happened later, I think he had a crash probably. Like he felt depressed, like he felt drained by his high. Like whatever high happened, it probably drained him. And so if when he was high he had access to an antipsychotic, like to relax his brain so that he could reset and restart from so that he could restart and get on with his life. um like he could have taken the antipsychotic, rested, and when the antipsychotic cleared he could have resumed his life, and he would have avoided the high and be able to stay like level. And then whatever happens later, he would have time to learn of his fluctuations and learn to cope with it. But whenever he was rushed to the psychiatric hospital, he would always answer the psychiatrist in a way that showed that he was fine. Like they asked him, "Do you hear voices? Do you feel this? Do you feel that?" He was always like saying, "Oh, I'm fine. I don't hear voices. I don't feel high. I'm this. I'm that." And so the psychiatrist who was trying to see if he was a risk to himself, found at the moment that he wasn't a risk, so he let him go. And I think it's a skill to have, like whenever you're wrongfully admitted in a psychiatrist in a psych ward, the thing that you need to do is to convince, like not by being talkative, but by answering the psychiatrist's question in a way that rules out every sign that you're a harm to yourself and to others and that you have no symptoms. This is only if you've been wrongfully admitted in a psychiatric ward, but it's not always the case. Sometimes you just need to see the psychiatrist once and he prescribes you a few medication, and you're not obliged to take those medication if like you're not admitted in a hospital. You like once you're released from the psych ward, or if you just saw a psychiatrist once and you're free, you're not obliged to take those medications, but you could always take them only when you need them. And then when you reset after taking the meds, you're not obliged to keep taking them. Like Kanye West used to, was admitted. He was admitted once. Um, he was diagnosed as bipolar one, and he used to had have like he used to have like they prescribed him medication. They told him to take it every day, but he only took it like once or twice a week. So that's smart. So he was only taking it as needed, not exactly as the psychiatrist told him to. And Kanye West is an interesting case because, like, where do you draw the line? Like, yes, Kanye West, whenever he goes in discussions, he does seem like sometimes it doesn't make sense, but that's just a state of this is just a state of mind on a continuum of state of mind. I think Kanye West's brain is really a creative brain, and he can see patterns and connections that other don't see. So it's hard to really relate with him. But at the same time, he's able to like. It doesn't seem like he's a harm to himself or to others. So he does like people are not able to force him to be admitted in a psych ward. And also he's rich, so I guess it helps. So where do you draw the line? Like Etika, he ended up killing himself, the streamer. But Kanye West, he had symptoms, but he was still able to like live a life and take care of himself, even though he said stuff that was a bit different than other people. But that's fine if he doesn't mean any harm and he's not harming anybody or himself. Whatever. Like the thing about that is like probably many people have symptoms of bipolar one, but they don't end up talking about it or getting hospitalized because they're high functioning individuals. Like you do not need to like publicly state it and go to a psychiatrist if you can cope with your symptoms. Like some people, they feel highs from time to time without taking any drugs. Some people are more suspicious. Some people hear voices, but it doesn't matter if they keep like living comfortable, like they're able to have a functional life that's stable and coherent. It doesn't matter if you have like symptoms of bipolar or schizophrenia, as long as you're not a harm to yourself, you're functioning, you have good relationships. So doesn't matter, whatever. Yeah, so I read a few books on people with schizophrenia. I have them here, I guess. Um, So these are, yeah. The thing that stood out to me from these books, I read also, I guess that's it. Let me check what other book I read about like those memoirs of people who recovered from their illnesses. Some of them ended up taking medication. Some of them they didn't need any medication. Like they didn't end up in a psychiatric hospital 20 years without any medication, and they're still fine. So let's go through them one by one. Um, so Mind Estranged was the story of a woman like who was really bright. She did neur- biochemistry researches when she was only 16 or 17. Some researches were really important, and she was always isolated, and she kept working till like 1 or 2 in the morning. So something I find interesting is that some people will work until really late in the night, and they will not sleep a lot and be productive for a long period of time, and they will still be able to be stable mentally. One of the examples are Tesla and Paul Erdos. And Paul Erdos is even like, it's crazy how Paul Erdos, like, Tesla during the height of his career wasn't sleeping a lot, and he was really really productive, and he would work like all day long, maybe till morning 4 a.m. whatever. And it was the same thing with Paul Erdos. And Paul Erdos is a special case because he was taking a lot of stimulants. He was taking amphetamines and caffeine pills, and he was, even though he took all those drugs, he was still like mentally sane. And so this woman was an example of a person who was really productive also. She studied also, she did her researches, biochemistry researches really late in the night. And she ended up, I don't know, I don't know for how long till her schizophrenia symptoms appeared, but she was really withdrawn from people, and she had interest in other people, like obsessive interest in other people. For example, a person who went to Africa, and she then felt that she had a mission to go to Africa and understand poverty over there and try to change the world and save the world. So that's an important trap that a lot of people with psychosis have, is they tend to have grandiose ideals of where they want to be. And one of those subjects that recurs often is they feel like they want to save the world. Like in their mind, they're convinced that they have the power to save the world, whatever that means. And so they will have grandiose ideas, but they will not be able to put them to fruition. But the woman in Mind is Strange, she was actually able to found to how do you say that? She was able to finance the opening of a clinic in Kenya. So she was able to do something, but she did that at the expense of like ruining a career in biochemistry. It's interesting because sometimes people, they have a skill, like an advanced skill like math, physics or something, and they will throw it away for some mission. And I do not say that it's wrong. Sometimes they're able to accomplish a lot in the mission, but sometimes the mission is so grandiose, and the end goal is so high that the person like loses touch with reality. And so I find it important to like stick to your strength. I find it important to like um, to be grounded, to do stuff with like a low bar objective and go step by step instead of having too high of ideal. But also I find it helpful for a person that's prone to mental illness to work with their strength, with their skills, and to stick with their skills longer. So one of the symptoms of mania is that you tend to, in the state of high, you tend to start too many projects and you finish a few. So one of the things I find might help me and other people is you stick to a few things, to less things, and you try to get them done. Like you stick to a few things and you stay longer on them to get them done. If you lose motivation, you just do a little every day, but you come back to it instead of like constantly seeking something new and like getting drowned by 100 new stuff and getting nothing done. She eventually also she lived on the street for a long time, and it was really courageous of her how she was able to survive. And she started having hallucinations, auditory, visually, tactile hallucinations. And while she was on the street, she was constantly focused on getting the fundings. She would travel so often. She met a lot of people. She was trying to get her mission to fund some clinic in Africa, and that's I applaud that. But yeah, her brain like suffered a lot of um like pain, and they ended up like she was put on a few medication, Zyprexa, Geodon, and Invega, but she wasn't able to focus too much and she gained a lot of weight. Later on, they kept asking for new psychiatrists, and they asked a psychiatrist like sometimes one psychiatrist doesn't have the right combination for you. Every psychiatrist have their own solution for you. It will never be the same medication from one psychiatrist to the other. But she was able to like her parents were supportive of her, but for a long time she cut connections from her parents and she was isolated from them in her state of psychosis. She was isolated from her parents, but she met a lot of strangers also. But eventually she got connected to her parents when she was hospitalized, and their parents kept searching for a psychiatrist to give her the right combination, and they ended up giving her clozapine, and it was the only medication that really silenced her hallucinations. And she was sleeping 16 hours a day with that medication, but she was able to study and go back to school, to college, to study, to have a degree in biochemistry, even though she was already like precautious in this subject when she was really young. And because she slept a lot, they gave her awakening agent. It's not an amphetamine, but it allowed her to stay awake longer. So they gave her Provigil and then Nuvigil. The thing about their situation is that they never tried to see if she could learn to cope with her illness. I don't know what she's doing right now, but I feel like they thought that the medication was like a bulletproof method of getting rid of her disease and allowing her to function. So I guess I respect that because I know another person who is taking like 5 milligrams of Zyprexa and she works for Google and she have a stable life and she makes a lot of money. So I do not condone that, but I feel like when you read the other memoirs, you will see that there are other ways to recover, and sometimes it takes longer to recover, but there are other ways that you can recover with the minimal amount of medication or no amount of medication. but you have to be lucky to have the right abilities, the right coping abilities, the right experience, the right risk taking. Because I feel like whatever crisis you're in, like psychosis, mental breakdown, nervous breakdown, anger, exploding, I feel like if you give that person a space and time to explore that crisis, and if you give it enough time in a way that that person doesn't hurt himself and others, I feel like when the crisis passes, the person will be able to understand himself better than if you're directly like giving him medication that like hides all the damage that could be worked on. So sometimes when people like are sad or angry, sometimes the storm is really loud, but it will always pass if you give it some time in a safe space. And sometimes people with psychosis or bipolar, if you give them a safe space to explore their feelings, their emotions, they can kind of have a better awareness of themselves rather than sedating them from the start. And so I find it important to go to a hospital if you cannot handle yourself. But if you have a safe place, a space like a parent who's tolerant of her child having an anger explosion, and letting the kid like come back to baseline, and to give him some time to understand what went wrong, I feel like it will have a better chance of allowing the person to adjust himself, to rewire himself. So I really applaud like the parents who like give their child some time, like even though the child like bangs a wall or do something like that, as long as they make sure the child doesn't harm himself or other, and allow the child to explore his state of mind. I feel like those types of parents allow their children really to bloom, or to last a lifetime in a better way, rather than people responding directly as an emergency. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Like, so this is for Mind is Strange. I can talk about The Fight to Be, and the other book also, Surviving Schizophrenia. I'm a bit hungry, so I'm gonna come back to talk about this later.